My fiancé left me before our wedding for the neighbor's daughter, but his father secretly changed his will to benefit me. Hey Reddit. Okay, where do I even begin? This whole situation feels like something out of a soap opera, but it is 100% my life right now. I am Anna, 28 years old, and until about 8 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was engaged to Thomas Peterson, who is 30. We had been together for 6 years, since our last year of college, and we were planning this big, beautiful wedding. Thomas comes from a very wealthy family. His father, Mr. Howard Peterson, built a massively successful construction empire from the ground up. His mother, Carol Peterson, is more focused on social standing and appearances. We lived in a fairly affluent town where everyone kind of knows everyone else's business, which becomes relevant later, trust me. Thomas and I had what I thought was a great relationship. We laughed a lot, traveled, supported each other's careers. I am a graphic designer. He worked in his father's company, though mostly in a role Howard created for him. He was charming, handsome, and everyone thought we were the perfect couple. We bought a lovely house together, not too far from his parents and, unfortunately, right across the street from the Henderson family. The Hendersons have a daughter, Kayla, who is 25. Kayla always seemed, well, let us just say she enjoyed attention, especially from men with money. She had a bit of a reputation in town, but I never paid much attention to it. Thomas always acted like she was just an annoying neighbor kid he barely noticed. Oh, how wrong I was. Wedding planning was in full swing. We had the venue booked, a stunning historical estate. My dress was custom made, invitations were sent, deposits were paid everywhere. We are talking a 6-figure wedding, mostly funded by Howard, who was incredibly generous. Howard and I actually got along really well. Unlike Thomas, who seemed mostly interested in the perks of his father's wealth, Howard was sharp, hardworking, and surprisingly down to earth despite his millions. We bonded over old movies and a shared love for gardening. He often expressed frustration subtly about Thomas's lack of drive and entitlement. Carol was polite to me, but always a bit reserved. I think she never quite thought I was good enough for her precious Tommy, coming from a middle-class background myself. Still, she was involved in the wedding planning, mostly ensuring it met her standards for impressing her social circle. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. About 5 weeks before the wedding date, Thomas started acting distant. He was working late more often, jumpy when his phone buzzed, less affectionate. I tried talking to him, asking if he was stressed about the wedding or work. He brushed it off, saying everything was fine, just pre-wedding jitters. I bought it mostly because I wanted to. Who wants to believe their relationship is crumbling right before their wedding? Then came the bombshell. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from finalizing the seating chart, feeling excited and a little overwhelmed. Thomas was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. He looked pale. I asked him what was wrong. He took a deep breath and told me he couldn't go through with the wedding just like that. My stomach dropped. I asked him why, if it was cold feet, we could postpone talk about it. He just shook his head. Then he said the words I will never forget, I am in love with someone else. My mind raced. Who? When? How? It felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. I demanded to know who it was. He hesitated, then mumbled, Kayla, our neighbor Kayla. The girl he always claimed to find annoying. It felt like a physical blow. He admitted they had been seeing each other for about 2 months. 2 months, while we were tasting wedding cakes and picking out first dance songs. He had been sneaking across the street, sleeping with her while planning our future. The betrayal was immense, suffocating. I remember screaming at him, crying, asking how he could do this. He just sat there looking pathetic, saying he was sorry, but he couldn't help his feelings. He said Kayla understood him in a way I didn't. What a classic line, right? The sheer audacity. I told him to get out. He actually looked surprised, like he expected me to, what, understand, pack his bags for him. He gathered a few things and walked out, heading straight across the street to Kayla's parents' house. I watched him go from the window, feeling numb and utterly humiliated. The next few days were a blur of tears, anger, and logistical nightmares. Calling vendors, canceling contracts, losing thousands upon thousands in deposits. Informing our families and friends was excruciating. My family was furious and heartbroken for me. His mother, Carol, called me once. She sounded more annoyed about the inconvenience and the gossip than concerned about me. She actually suggested I should have seen it coming, implying I wasn't attentive enough to Thomas. Unbelievable. Howard, however, was different. He called me personally. He sounded genuinely devastated and deeply ashamed of Thomas. He apologized profusely for his son's behavior. He told me Thomas's actions were cowardly and dishonorable. He offered to cover all the lost deposits and any other costs associated with the cancellation, which I initially refused out of pride, but he insisted, wiring the money directly to my account despite my protests. He said it was the least he could do. He also told me very firmly that Thomas was a fool and had made the biggest mistake of his life. That call meant more to me than he probably realized. It was a small piece of validation in a sea of humiliation. Living across the street from my ex-fiancé and his new girlfriend was pure torture. They weren't exactly discreet. I would see them holding hands walking down the street, Kayla driving Thomas's expensive car, a gift from Howard, naturally, hosting loud parties in her parents' backyard. It felt like they were flaunting it. Thomas barely acknowledged my existence if we crossed paths. Kayla, on the other hand, seemed to relish it, often giving me smug little smiles. I tried my best to ignore them, focusing on work, leaning on my friends and family, and trying to piece my life back together. I eventually decided to sell the house we bought together. The market was good, but the process dragged out, meaning I was stuck there for longer than I wanted. Thomas agreed to sell, likely because Kayla wanted them to get a bigger, flashier place once they got their hands on his eventual inheritance. During this time, Howard checked in occasionally. Just short emails or texts asking how I was holding up. He never mentioned Thomas or Kayla. It felt like he was trying to maintain some connection, maybe out of guilt, maybe genuine concern. I appreciated it but kept my distance, needing to heal. About 6 months after the breakup, tragedy struck. Howard had a sudden, massive heart attack while on a business trip overseas. He passed away before they could get him proper medical care. The news was shocking. Despite everything with Thomas, I genuinely liked Howard. He was a good man caught in a difficult family dynamic. I felt a real sense of loss. The funeral was predictably tense. Carol was playing the grieving widow, supported by Thomas and Kayla, who was clinging to his arm looking somber but also, I thought, slightly triumphant. She was now officially linked to the wealthy Peterson family after all. I attended, sitting quietly in the back, wanting to pay my respects to Howard. Carol shot me a look that could curdle milk. Thomas avoided eye contact. Kayla smirked when she thought no one was looking. It was uncomfortable, to say the least, but I felt I owed it to Howard to be there. A couple of weeks later, I received a formal letter from Howard's estate lawyer, requesting my presence at the reading of the will. I was confused. Why would I need to be there? I assumed it was a mistake, maybe related to the wedding deposit reimbursement. I called the lawyer's office, and the paralegal confirmed, very politely but firmly, that my presence was specifically requested by Mr. Peterson in his final testament. Curiosity piqued, and feeling a strange sense of obligation to Howard, I decided to go. The lawyer's office was plush, quiet, and intimidating. Carol was there, dressed in expensive black, looking impatient. Thomas and Kayla sat beside her. Thomas looked nervous, probably anticipating the official confirmation of his vast inheritance. Kayla looked like the cat who got the cream, already mentally spending the money. A few other distant relatives and Howard's business partner were also present. The air was thick with expectation and barely concealed greed. The lawyer, a stern-looking man named Mr. Davies, began reading the will. It started with the usual legal jargon, distributing smaller bequests to relatives and charities. Then he got to the main part of the estate. He cleared his throat and looked directly at Thomas. He read a clause where Howard expressed his profound disappointment in Thomas's recent life choices, specifically citing his lack of character, loyalty, and responsibility in his personal and professional life. Thomas went pale. Carol gasped. Kayla's smug expression faltered. Mr. Davies continued. He stated that due to this disappointment, Howard had recently executed a codicil, a legal amendment to his will. This codicil drastically altered the distribution of his primary assets. Thomas was not disinherited completely. Howard left him a sum, enough to be comfortable but nowhere near the fortune he expected. It was explicitly placed in a trust managed by the firm, with strict conditions tied to proving gainful employment and responsible financial behavior, clearly designed to prevent him from squandering it or Kayla getting easy access. Thomas looked like he was going to be sick. Then came the part that made my jaw drop. Mr. Davies announced that the majority of Howard's personal fortune, including his controlling shares in Peterson Construction, the family's main residence, a massive lakeside property, and a significant portfolio of investments, was being left directly to me. Anna Miller, There was an audible collective gasp in the room. He read Howard's words, paraphrased of course, explaining his decision. Howard wrote about his respect for my character, my work ethic, and how he viewed me as the daughter he never had. He mentioned his regret over Thomas's actions and how he felt this was a way to right a wrong, to provide me with the security Thomas had recklessly thrown away. He stated his belief that I would be a better steward of his legacy and his company than his own son. I was stunned, absolutely speechless. Millions. He had left me millions of dollars and the keys to his empire. It felt unreal. While I was processing this, Thomas erupted. He shot out of his chair, face purple with rage, screaming that this was insane, that I must have manipulated his father, that I was a gold-digging whore. Kayla joined in, screeching about how unfair it was, how Howard must have been senile. Carol looked utterly shell-shocked, her perfectly composed facade crumbling. Thomas lunged towards me, yelling threats. Mr. Davies and Howard's business partner quickly intervened, physically restraining him. The lawyer calmly stated the will was legally sound, executed shortly after Thomas broke off our engagement, with Howard declared of sound mind by multiple physicians. He warned Thomas that any further outbursts or attempts to contest the will frivolously would result in legal action and potentially impact the trust he was granted. Security was called to escort a still screaming Thomas and a sobbing, cursing Kayla out of the office. Carol followed them, giving me a look of pure hatred before she left. The aftermath was immediate and ugly. Thomas predictably lawyered up and contested the will, claiming undue influence and lack of capacity. His case was incredibly weak. Howard had been meticulous. He had documented his reasons, obtained medical clearances, and ensured the codicil was ironclad. The legal battle dragged on for months, costing Thomas a significant chunk of his already reduced inheritance in legal fees, but ultimately, the court upheld the will completely. Howard's wishes were clear and legally binding. During this time, the harassment from Thomas and Kayla was relentless. Vicious online posts, anonymous threatening messages, attempts to spread rumors about me in town. Kayla, in particular, seemed unhinged, likely furious that her meal ticket had evaporated. They even tried confronting me in public a few times, causing embarrassing scenes. Carol actively fueled the fire, telling anyone who would listen how I had stolen her son's birthright. It was stressful and deeply unpleasant. Some people in town took their side, others supported me, and many just gossiped endlessly. Accepting the inheritance wasn't an easy decision, morally speaking. It felt strange to profit from such a sad situation. But then I thought about Howard. He clearly wanted this. He saw something in me, trusted me with his life's work. And honestly, after the way Thomas and his family, excluding Howard, had treated me, after the public humiliation and heartbreak, a part of me felt this was cosmic justice. It was validation. It was Howard's final act of kindness and perhaps his own form of revenge against a son who had disappointed him so deeply. So I accepted it. I hired my own team of lawyers and financial advisors. I took control of the shares in Peterson Construction. Howard's business partner, who also disliked Thomas's entitled attitude, was incredibly supportive and helped me navigate the transition. I started learning the business, attending board meetings, making decisions. It turns out I have a knack for it, something Howard apparently suspected. The company is thriving under the established management team and my oversight. I also took possession of the lakeside mansion. It felt weird at first, walking through the house that should have been Thomas's, but I decided to make it my own. I sold the house Thomas and I had shared, finally, using some of the proceeds and inheritance money to renovate the mansion extensively, erasing the old memories and creating a space that felt like mine. It is beautiful, peaceful, and overlooks the lake Howard loved. The best part, the consequences for Thomas and Kayla. Without the huge inheritance, their lavish lifestyle plans went up in smoke. Thomas's trust fund gives him a modest income, but only if he meets the stringent requirements, which involves holding down a real job, something he is struggling with. He apparently resents having to work for a living. Kayla, seeing that Thomas wasn't the millionaire she thought he was, reportedly started losing interest. Their relationship became strained, filled with arguments about money. I heard through the grapevine, because this town talks, remember, that they had a massive, public fight recently. Apparently she called him useless and pathetic now that Daddy's money was gone. Last I heard, she moved out of her parents' place and left town altogether, probably searching for her next wealthy target. Serves them both right, honestly. Thomas is stuck living in a small apartment. working a mid-level job he hates, outside the family company of course, as I now have influence there, and is apparently bitter and miserable. He has to watch me live in the house he grew up in, indirectly oversee the company he thought he would run, and generally thrive, all thanks to the father he disappointed. Carol still refuses to speak to me, but her social standing took a hit with all the public drama and Thomas's downfall. She doesn't have the same influence she used to. Life has moved on. I'm financially secure beyond my wildest dreams. I'm discovering a new career path in business that I find challenging and rewarding, and I am healing from the heartbreak. Howard's gift was unexpected, overwhelming, and came at a terrible cost, his passing. But I am determined to honor his faith in me. I am living well, proving him right. The revenge wasn't something I planned, but watching Thomas and Kayla face the consequences of their own actions has been, I admit, deeply satisfying. So Reddit, that's the story. It's been a roller coaster. Sometimes I still feel guilty, but mostly I feel grateful to Howard and determined to make the most of this second chance he gave me. Am I the asshole for keeping the inheritance and, in a way, benefiting from my ex-fiancé's shitty behavior? Update 1. Wow, Reddit. I honestly did not expect this post to blow up the way it did. Thank you all so much for the comments, messages, and awards. Reading through your responses has been incredibly validating. The overwhelming consensus seems to be not the asshole, which definitely helps quiet that little voice of guilt I sometimes still hear. So many of you shared similar sentiments, that Howard knew exactly what he was doing, that Thomas and Kayla got what they deserved, and that I should enjoy the life Howard wanted for me without an ounce of guilt. To answer a few common questions. Yes, the legal battle was stressful, but Howard had truly dotted every I and crossed every T. His lawyers were sharks, and Thomas's case was dismissed relatively quickly, though he did appeal, dragging it out longer. He ended up paying all court costs, further diminishing his trust fund access for a while. And no, I haven't had any direct contact with Thomas or Carol since the final court ruling. I see Thomas around town occasionally, looking significantly less polished than he used to. He actively avoids me. Fine by me. Someone asked about Kayla. The rumors were true. She did leave Thomas quite spectacularly. Apparently, the final straw was him being denied a significant withdrawal from his trust to buy her a luxury car. When it became clear the big money was never coming, she vanished. I have not seen or heard anything about her since she left town months ago. Good riddance. A lot of you commented on Howard. He really was a remarkable man. Complex for sure, given his relationship with Thomas, but fundamentally decent and shrewd. I have learned more about him through his business partner and long-time employees. He was respected, sometimes feared, but always seen as fair. Leaving me the inheritance seems entirely in character for someone who valued hard work and integrity above blood ties when push came to shove. He apparently told his lawyer he saw the breakup not just as a betrayal of me, but a betrayal of the values he tried to instill in Thomas. Life is good now. I am settling into my role overseeing Peterson construction. It is challenging, but I am learning so much. The employees seem relieved that Thomas is not in charge. I have also started doing some renovations on the lakeside house, nothing too drastic, but making it feel like home. It is strange sometimes, living in this huge place alone, but also incredibly empowering. I'm dating again, casually taking things slow. For the first time in a long time, I feel genuinely happy and optimistic about the future. Thank you again, Reddit, for your support. It meant the world. Update 2. Hello again, Reddit. It has been about a year since my original post and the first update. I wanted to share one final chapter because things have continued to evolve in ways I never expected, and honestly, your support back then really helped me solidify my resolve. Life continues to be surprisingly great. Peterson Construction is doing better than ever. We landed a couple of major contracts, and I have found I genuinely enjoy the strategic side of the business. Howard's business partner, Mr. Henderson, no relation to Kayla, thankfully, has become a wonderful mentor. We have honored Howard's legacy by not only maintaining the company's success, but also increasing its charitable contributions, something I know he would have approved of. The lakeside house is fully renovated and feels completely like my sanctuary. I host gatherings for my friends and family there often. My parents adore the place and are just thrilled to see me happy and thriving after everything I went through. Now for the part you are probably curious about, Thomas and Carol. Well, Thomas is still around, still working that same mid-level job. From what I hear, He is deeply in debt, having blown through any accessible parts of his trust fund on legal fees and trying to maintain a lifestyle he could no longer afford. He apparently tried asking me, through lawyers, for a loan or some kind of financial help a few months ago. My lawyers sent back a polite but firm refusal. The nerve of that guy, honestly. He made his bed. Carol is still in town too, but she is a shadow of her former socialite self. The gossip mill suggests she is financially strained as well, as Howard left her provided for, but not with unlimited funds, and she certainly cannot rely on Thomas. She avoids any place I might be. We have not spoken a word since the will reading. The most satisfying piece of news. Remember Kayla? She resurfaced recently, not in our town, thank goodness. Apparently she tried latching onto another wealthy older man in a city a few states over. Word got back, social media is a wild thing that it ended disastrously for her when his family intervened and exposed her gold-digging ways. Last I heard, she was working a minimum wage job and living in a tiny apartment, complaining bitterly online about how unfair life is. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. It seems karma eventually catches up. As for me, I am truly happy. I am financially independent, professionally fulfilled, and emotionally healed. The inheritance from Howard was life-changing, but not just because of the money. It gave me a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms, stronger and more confident than before. I will always be grateful to Howard for seeing my worth and giving me this incredible opportunity. His faith in me has been the greatest gift. The whole ordeal taught me a lot about people, about resilience, and about unexpected kindness. Thomas's betrayal was devastating, but in the end, it led me to a future far better than the one I had planned with him. And that feels like the best kind of outcome. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.